Okay, so today we'll be conducting audit follow-up, right? What do you understand by audit follow-up, Frederick?
Yes, so obviously you have some non-conformities and that need to be addressed. The only thing I'm not sure about now is this, like, because I mean, one thing is the audit itself, right? Where you, for example, you award the certificate, the certification. And I mean, you have maybe some observations. I mean, obviously, if you have non-conformities, you wouldn't need to follow up, right? You would fail, I guess. But if, let's say, you only had a few observations, and I guess you need to follow up, or you need to track corrective actions.
Okay.
So to be honest, one thing I'm not entirely sure is the process, right? Because you've done the audit, and let's say there's only non-conformities. So there's only observations or areas of improvement, right? So then what is the process actually? Because somebody needs to issue the certificate, right? I'm not sure how that would work. And then also, is there a process for the areas of improvement, or you just leave them open until there's like a, another audit? So that part I'm not entirely sure yet, to be honest.
Okay. So yeah, you're kind of right. Because once you come up with once the auditor issues the audit report, right? And it gives the findings as to whether it's non-conformities, observations, or areas of that they view as positive comments, right, from the audit that they have conducted. Then that's where the audit report will be issued. So this audit report will be given to the client. Okay, will be given to the client for follow-up. So as we go through the slides, we will talk a bit more about each part of each what comes after, with regard to the process, it is the client receiving the audit report, okay, and then what they need to do is to review what's in there, okay, whether it's observations, non-conformities, and then analyze, the findings to see whether they actually agree with it, whether they supposed to take actions, which is what we call corrective actions, and then they will have to respond with an official audit response. Okay, so that will be the next step, and after that, it will go back to the auditor, this audit response, and the auditor will review the audit response to note, okay, yeah, okay, so I think they say that they will do this, and so on. And after that, that will be to see whether after that they will take that into account when they do the follow-up audit. Okay, so
it's basically still, I mean, so let's say you find a few non-conformities, you wouldn't fail them immediately, but you give them the opportunity to address the non-conformities. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So if you are talking about, let's say, a certification audit, okay, that's where I think you mentioned a bit about, so when do you issue the certificate or not, right? So looking at what the issues are, if the auditor actually feels that they need to close this and that issues, or all the issues by a certain time, before they would get the satisfaction, that things are in place, and thereafter will they issue the certificate. Okay, so
so you would also do it, okay, because it's two things, right? I mean, one thing is you have a couple of non-conformities, you would normally fail them, right? And you still give them the chance to maybe fix some or address some of the issues. But what if, for example, there's only like a few observations or areas of improvement, right? So basically, you would be able to certify them. Would you still do a follow-up, or would you just say, oh yeah, you're fine, you know? We just sort of keep track of the sort of areas of improvement. Anyway, they're covered in the report. And then next time you do another audit in 1 year's time, then only there's a follow-up. So this follow-up, is it like always independent regardless of, you know, whether you have non-conformities or not?
Okay, so let's say, for example, in the case where, you know, the audit was smooth and there were just observations, okay, no critical issues, then thereafter they will issue the certificate. So let's say, for example, ISO 22301 in this case that we're referring to, then they will issue the ISO 22301 certification. As to what follows after the certification, we can talk more about it when we come to surveillance audit, which is one of the, okay, but as an overview of that process, right? This is how it's going to be like. Okay. So that hopefully will give you that picture. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So let's go into the slides now. Okay. So we're going to follow up on this. Okay, which is that the follow-up review reports, surveillance audit. Okay. After these slides, we will also be working on an assignment. So which is a follow-up from what you have actually done from the previous session. Okay. Okay. So how about let me just check your. Do you remember that process that I just flashed? You know, that 4-stage, because that is the key, the fundamentals, right, to the audit for an audit. Do you remember that 4-stage?
For the audit itself?
Yep.
I mean, obviously you have to prepare.
Can go there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first stage is audit planning and preparation. Okay. Then followed by field work, review and reporting, and then now we are at audit follow-up. Okay. So maybe you can share with me what you can remember about the planning and preparation stage and stage 1, 2, and 3.
So the planning and preparation is basically, you know, familiarizing yourself with the company you're assessing, right? So, you know, trying to understand the business, let's say, and also then come up with a list of potential questions which you want to ask or documents you want to see. So that's what I understand as planning and preparation. The field work is then really when you're on site. So, you know, this is where you have the schedule for 2 days, you know, you're meeting all these people, you're asking all these questions, you're viewing all the documents. And then the review and the reporting is, yeah, basically documenting it, putting it in writing, and then also having like the how should I say, the review session, the final session with the client, right, or the company you're assessing. So I hope that's right.
Yeah, but I just want to elaborate a bit more about what you have mentioned. With regard to the audit planning and preparation, right? Yeah, we try to get to know the client, their business, so that we can actually come up with the audit scope, right? We know their requirements, what they are trying to certify against. You know, is there a standard? Like ISO 22301 or your TR standard, you know, and so the planning and preparation will also include the audit schedule. Okay, the audit schedule, which says that okay, this is when we are going to meet the people from the organization when we go down to do the audit field work. So this preparation, liaising, you know, with the auditees representative, okay, will be done in the planning and preparation stage. Okay, and then the audit field work will be the doing the actual audit, reviewing the documents, the documentation. So the reviewing the documentation, interviewing the people that you have identified that you want to meet in according to that audit schedule. So that will be the audit field work. Audit review and reporting, that's where you will document, the findings and eventually coming up with that report. Okay, so that is that three stages, the first three stages of the audit process. And finally, after the report is out, then that's where the follow-up will need to come in, which is the final stage 4. Okay, yeah. Okay, so just now we talked about the process, right? So what comes after the audit report, after it has been issued? So the client will need to review the findings and then to come back to the auditor with an official audit response, okay, based on what is in the audit report. Okay, and that when the auditor reviews the response, okay, as to what the client says that they will need to do, okay, based on the non-conformities, then that's where the auditor, after reviewing the audit response, will come up with a follow-up report to say that, okay, yeah, we accept what you have done, these are the timelines that you said you will do it. So we will be letting the organization implement whatever that they say they want to do, and then we will follow up with another audit either soon, okay, because I think you mentioned just now, right, Frederick, that it could be some major issues before they can get certified. Then in this case, then that follow-up will be sooner, okay, because they need to rectify some urgent findings, some urgent issues, okay, before they can get certified. Or if not, if it is, if what they have actually put down is corrective actions for continuous improvement, for example, then and also rectification of minor issues, then the auditor will say, in the follow-up report that, okay, we accept what you had, okay, and we will all these actions, right, that the client says that they will do will be reviewed. The statuses will be reviewed in the next audit. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So there has to be a written response by the client?
Yes.
So that's mandatory?
Yes. I will say that it is expected to have it, yeah, because it is also a form of acceptance by the client of the audit report. Okay, when you do your TR audit, right, do they actually give you a response?
Yeah, but usually it's by email or so, you don't really get anything formal.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so it's actually good for them to have the document, because if they are expected to implement some corrective actions, they should say when they're going to do that as well. So you kind of need that document. So if that's the case, then you will have to come through, they can send you by email, but you will have to come through as a response of whether what they will do with the findings that you have.
Okay. And so what's the typical timeline for the follow-up? Is it like weeks? Is it months? Or do you have like a year? Or what are typical timelines?
Usually the response, are you referring to a response?
Yeah, because if it says will be discussed, so now we're talking about the follow-up review, right? So
oh, you're talking about the follow-up? Okay. So the follow-up report, let's say it will be in the next audit. Okay, if assuming that it's not something that it needs to be urgently fixed, then it will be in the follow-up next follow-up audit, and that could be another year or from now or
so
two.
but then does it have to be the same auditor, or can they sort of choose to hire another auditor for the follow-up?
They can, but usually if we are talking about let's say a certification audit, right, it usually comes in with a certification and then followed up by 2 surveillance audits. So it's like it's a 3-year kind of certification timeline, okay, a package. So usually in that case, it will be the same auditor who will be doing that 3 years, but after that they can change.
Okay, understand.
Yeah. Okay, right. Okay. Good. I think you're getting it, huh? Okay, so the follow-up report. Okay, by the way, after we've gone through this, later this afternoon, I'll be showing you some of the sample reports so that you can have an idea of how it looks like. I think that will help you, to frame it better. Okay. So this follow-up report, right, is a document generated after the follow-up review of the auditee's response to the report. So after the response come in, then you need to do a review with your auditor, and then you put in your follow-up report, and list the listing of actions taken by the client to resolve the original report finding. Then you say, okay, yes, this is we will review the actions to be taken in the next audit. Okay, pretty straightforward. So it's just the process that we go through. Okay, so just now we talk about what happens after the certification, right? So after the certification, okay, after the certification, after year 2, there will be a surveillance audit to the auditor, which the auditor will actually come in to review the statuses of the actions that the organization said they will do. Okay, that's the one part of it. The other part of it is to do an audit, which we call, let's say, a surveillance audit, right? That comes into the organization to see that, oh, they are still meeting the BCM standard requirements. Okay, because it doesn't, some organizations will just, okay, I'm going to get certified, so all my documents are in order, they are signed off, they have been reviewed, but okay, after 1 year, 2 years, are they still doing that? Are the documents still in order? Is there evidence that they are following what they say they will do? So this is the purpose of the surveillance audit. And after year 3, right, there will be another surveillance audit, because it's actually a periodic check kind of. And then after the year 3, then that's where we will also recertify them for the next 3 years again. So this is usually how it works. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to cover this online examination later on at the end. Okay, so what we will do now is that we're going to do the assignment to look at the findings that you have in your audit report. So what have you got from the last session, in your audit report?
Oh, wait, I need to find it again.
Okay, can
Because,
take your time.
because obviously in the meantime I've been doing lots of other things. Just a moment. Okay. Because I didn't manage to do it for the entire end-to-end. Was it called handbook? So I did it for business and IT, and I started with the business impact analysis, but I've also done the risk assessment and the BCM strategy.
Okay.
So, and I had, that's it. Yeah, like I had a few points. So essentially I only have this one slide. I know I was supposed to do it to finish it. So this was all related to the, so the first one was related to the risk assessment. So one thing I noticed that when they provided the information about the risk assessment, they didn't really specify the impact criteria and the levels, right? So like it hasn't really been documented properly. I mean, normally, if this was a real audit, right, you would probably ask them for the documents and they would probably come up with it. It's quite likely that they have defined a, ERM risk assessment framework. But if I was just on the information that was provided, right, it wasn't there. So I raised that as a non-conformity because if they haven't really decided their risk assessment framework, like the risk impacts, the risk levels, right, then this would be a major concern. So that's why back then I raised it as an NC, but realistically in the real audit, you would probably ask them for it and they would probably come up with it. Then another thing I had was related to the impact. Yeah. So as part of the BIA, business impact analysis, you have to assess like the impact should one of these business functions be unavailable. And one thing I noticed, the information that was provided, right, by the supposed client is that they didn't really assess the potential impact the unavailability of the business function may have. They didn't really address it properly. So they didn't really estimate, for example, the financial impact properly. So yeah, here I was saying the impact over time has not been estimated correctly.
Okay.
So that was also one point. Yeah.
For this, this point 1B, right? Is there a particular business function that you were zooming into, or it's across the board?
Yeah, BIT, business and IT.
Okay.
So
that's the department, is it? Or that's a critical function?
Yeah. That's the department, and basically the critical function, from what I remember, was like supporting the IT applications of the organization.
Oh.
So, and I remember like they assessed the impact. I think they said like, oh, it's the cost of 2 laptops which we need for, in case of a disaster, we need to buy 2 laptops. But actually, that's not the correct way of doing it, right? I mean, the financial impact of an incident, I mean, it's really, what if the whole business function is not available? What would be the financial impact if suddenly the organization doesn't have like the applications up and running anymore, right? So I just felt that they didn't really estimate the impact over time correctly. So maybe, okay, the feedback last time was that maybe this shouldn't really be an NC, maybe just an observation, right? Because as long as they have defined the critical business functions, we're okay. And how they come up with the critical business functions, maybe it's more of their concern, but yeah. So maybe this should be changed actually to area for improvement, I guess. And then also related to the BIA, so they actually listed upstream dependencies and services, but there was no assessment in terms of if these dependencies support the RTO, RPO, and MTPD requirements, which they defined, right? So they just sort of defined the RTO values, but then and listed dependencies, but there's no assessment of the dependencies in terms of, do these dependencies actually support the RTO, yes or no? So that part was sort of missing, I thought.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then also had one related to the recovery strategy. So again, this is more about the content, right? So I was saying the recovery strategy chosen may not support the RTO of the business function. So now, I don't know, I mean, that's actually also a question I raised last time, because I think as an auditor, you focus on whether they have done all the different steps, right? Whether they have the documentation available, whether they follow the process, right? So, but actually, you're not supposed to assess whether they've done it correctly. As long as they have done a BIA and they have defined RTO, etc., I think they're okay. But the way or the process they use to come up with these RTOs, maybe it doesn't make sense. But I guess this is not something we assess, right? So it's more about we assess the overall process, the availability of the documents, but we wouldn't really sort of assess, the recovery strategy, does it make sense or not? So I guess that's not really in our scope. That's why I just put it as an area for improvement.
What makes you think that it may not support the RTO? What's the recovery strategy that you are questioning?
So back then, I think they were saying, I think the RTO was like 24 hours. And then the recovery strategy was buy 2 laptops and ask our vendor, I think the dependencies, right? They had some vendors as dependencies to step in. But, if your RTO is like 24 hours and maybe it's a Sunday, maybe your vendor is not available. Maybe you don't have a SLA with your vendor,
Okay.
So,
okay. So which is your recommendation for them to look into it to see whether it really can be done within that 24 hours, the RTO.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, I think my feeling is that probably if you do an ISO certification audit, you wouldn't really worry about these kind of things, right? You just check, okay, RTO defined, dependencies identified, and strategy is there, yes, right? But you wouldn't really assess whether it makes sense or not. I think that's why I just put it as an AFI.
Yeah, I think it should be an AFI because yeah, you're right. It's questioning the effectiveness, whether it can comply, and so on. Okay, so good. I think you've got 4 findings there. So what we are going to do, right, for this assignment that we are doing is to actually review this for the client. Okay, assuming that you are the client receiving this report. Okay, so you will analyze your findings and you will come up with your audit response, right? Correct. Just now we talked about the audit response, and this audit response could be your comments, the corrective action that you plan to take. Okay, and as well as the target, the timeline. Okay, the completion date for implementing that corrective action. Okay, so this is what you need to do now. Okay, you can go ahead to use the Excel spreadsheet which you actually pasted this table from, and then just add the 2 columns, which is corrective action and the completion, the implementation date. Okay, to each of these 1A, B, C, and D. Okay.
Yeah. Also, one question. So, I mean, okay, now if I'm the client, right, and I receive all the non-conformities or the areas for improvement. So, is it good enough if I say, oh, we will do this to address it, or do I actually have to show, as a client, that I've done it? So, is that good enough? Like having a plan, is that sufficient, or do I really have to prove that it has been done?
Okay, you will actually have to say, besides your plan of action, you will need to give the completion date, the
Okay.
implementation date. So,
Mhm.
which is what the auditor will do in the next audit to see that there will be evidence that you can produce that you have actually done by the timeline that was stated in the audit response.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you can add the 2 columns in the spreadsheet. You can take okay. You can
Because
take
this is
20.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, you can actually just copy this table into an Excel spreadsheet if you want. It may be easier because I think you have to add 2 more columns, so it's easier to go left and right. Okay.
Okay, let me see if I can do it. Hang on.
Yeah. You can take the next 20 minutes to try to work out the other 2 columns for discussion later on.
So am I taking the position of the client now?
Yes, you are taking the position of the client. And then we will discuss from the auditor's point of view. I will assume that I'll be the auditor receiving your audit response, and then looking at what you have put in, whether there are questions and whether it's acceptable. After that, we'll come back 20 minutes later. So you can just do it now. Okay, you can just leave the screen on. So if you have questions as you work on it, then you can just pop your question.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So I'll just switch off the camera.
Yeah. Okay.
While I stare at the screen. I just put a relative date, right? Because I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, normally they would put in some date, right? But let's just say.
You can just based on, let's say if now it's July, right? End of July. When do you think you will complete it? Yeah. So roughly, something that is more reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And this one. I mean, this one realistically, they would have to redo the BIA.
I'll let you work through it. Okay. I'll ask you the questions later on.
Okay. Sure.
So right now, right? So this is the audit response, okay, with the corrective actions, right, that the client have sent in, right, for us to review as auditors, correct? So we're going to look at it and see the first one. The risk impact criteria levels have not been defined formally, okay? The corrective action is that an ERM framework that includes a definition and description is currently defined. So the client is saying that they actually have it?
No, so I mean, to be honest, I mean, if they do a BCM cycle, they should have a risk management framework, right? I mean, usually the risk management framework is more basic than a BCM system. So I would expect there to be a risk assessment framework, but in case they don't have it, right? So that's sort of the assumption now for this audit because it wasn't provided. So if they don't really have it, then they would really have to develop it, right? That would be mandatory.
Yeah. Okay. So that includes the definition and description of impact is currently defined. Okay. So because this is a bit vague, right? As to whether they actually have it, they don't, or they need to review it. So it may warrant a clarification on this point. Okay. So that we know clearly what is the corrective action that they're actually doing. Is it that they need to put one together, or they have to go and check their ERM framework to see it has been defined? If not, then they will have to put it in. So it's good to clarify with the client before accepting this particular one. Okay. Yeah. So the second, okay, let's say okay, since we are talking about this, right? So if you are on the first point, 1A, let's say 1 year down the road, okay, when you are doing the follow-up audit, what will you be looking for as an auditor?
So obviously I want to see the document where we have a definition of the risk assessment framework which they follow.
Okay, yeah.
What so it's else? Really, I think this one is really about the documentation. It's not so much about the process they follow.
Okay. And then what else will you also look at? Let's say, for example, they didn't have it at first, right? So now they come up with this table, okay, of the impact criteria and the levels. So I'm asking that question because I was just thinking from an auditor's point of view. After they have established this set of criteria, I would also, in a follow-up audit, check if the other business functions or business units, their BIA and or the risk assessment, whether they are following this new table. Okay, to see whether it has been formally implemented throughout the organization. So this will be an area that will be part of the audit. You know, as you plan what you want to look at, that will be an item that that we should see. And
also, I mean, it should tie into the BIA, right? Sorry, into the risk assessment of the BCM, right? So if because it's a bit of reverse engineering, because ideally all these impact criteria, they should have been defined beforehand, right? So now if they change it, then it may be inconsistent with the risk assessment which they have done as part of the BCM. So that's probably a bit of a concern there.
Yeah, and then the following year, they should have a risk assessment conducted as the part of that follow-up cycle, and that is another check whether they are just creating that table for you or they have implemented.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the second one. Okay, I think this is pretty straightforward, right? The 1B, that they can check and review to see whether the concern that you have, they can zoom into it when they actually do the review. And when you go into the organization the following year for the audit, then probably what I would do is that I will interview the business unit to see how they actually did the review. Maybe did they actually do a check to see what will be the vendor's lead time, for example. Okay, so now we look at the third one.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, right, I mean, there's probably certain gaps which you can only really address by doing a complete new cycle, right? Because I mean, obviously, if I change now the way I assess the financial impact, this may have an impact on the RTOs, etc., right? So So it may have an impact now on the entire BCM cycle. So probably this one, I guess you can only really address if as part of a new iteration.
Yeah, I will accept that they do it as at the next iteration. Yeah. And also you have also stated that it's an AFI, so I don't see a real urgent need to do that. Yeah. Okay, so the 1C, right? Okay. Okay. I like the part about that. The besides doing a review, right? That the client, that's yourself, right? That you have actually put that down to do the reassessment. There's also the second part about that the dependencies will also be readdressed as part of the BIA. So that there's two parts to it, right? There's what they would do if there's actually a gap that they discover. Yeah. So good, auditor will be happy. Okay, the 1D, the coverage strategy chosen may not support. Okay, will be reassessed and amended if necessary as part of New Year's reiteration of the BCM cycle.
Because I mean, changing the recovery strategy is not something you would just, it's not really a corrective action, right? So this is sort of the core of the BCM, defining a recovery strategy. So you would probably only do it as part of a iteration, complete iteration.
Actually, okay, let's say, for example, I'm the client, right? The reviewing the findings, the report that the auditor has just issued, right? And it says, okay, recovery strategy chosen may not support the RTO of the business function. So if they need any clarification from you as to what do you really mean, I think which the question that I asked, then they can actually clarify with you, right, as the auditor, as to what you meant by this finding. And or there may be discussion to that before they actually accept the report, that you either elaborate or provide more details in the finding so that they can they see as something that is more exact to look at. Maybe they can even talk about the as the part of the corrective action to mention the BIT01 function specifically. Okay, and so forth. Okay, so that's just some thoughts that I have. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. But do you actually have the opportunity, because I mean, sort of explaining things to you requires you know, personal interaction again, right? So do you actually have the chance then to maybe have meetings or calls with the client, or is it all written, you know, communication?
Okay. Prior to issuing this report, right? In your last session, I think you talked about the closing meeting as well, right? Did you talk about the closing meeting? Yeah.
Yeah.
The closing meeting is where you would present this set of findings to the client management, okay, to get their inputs. So clarifications, like the ones that we mentioned, can and should actually take place at the closing meeting. Okay, that so that they would ask to get a better understanding of what that is. So that would that should be clarified during then, and then after that the process would be smoother. But that does not that does not stop any further communication, you know, other than the formal documents issuance and documentation of the audit response and so on, there can be a call set up, to discuss a particular issue. That is fine. Yeah. If you see that there's a need to do it, then that's okay. Because but I would say that in general it's quite all right, because it has been discussed at the closing meeting. Unless, at the closing meeting there have been arguments about that it needs to be reworded, this finding and so on, because that's not true, and so forth. And then the rephrase the statement in the audit report is not satisfactory, then maybe there is a follow-up discussion. But in general, it's quite all right after the closing meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so we're done with this assignment that we need to do today, so that you understand that whole process. So we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we will come back later on. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to give a recap of that whole process and some of the sample documents and procedures, so that you can see what are the actual documents that can be used. Okay, so I'm going to go through that BCM procedure, okay, the audit procedure, to recap. So let me share screen. Okay, so under this BCM manual, if you scroll down to the procedures, right, there is this procedure called internal audit. Okay, so this is the internal audit procedure. So it documents the process, the entire process of what the organization actually does with respect to internal audit. So what is expected, right, under this internal audit procedure will be the purpose, okay, about the conducting of the audit, what does the scope actually covers. And you can see that there's a section here on responsibility that details who are the people who are responsible, and the roles, like the organization BCM coordinator and audit team leader, the appointed auditor, and the auditees, and so forth. Okay, that like I think what we talked about just now, the auditee will be responsible for taking timely correction and corrective action regarding the discrepancies found during the audit. Okay, so those corrective actions that you come up with will be the responsibility of the auditee, as well as the executive management for reviewing that all these corrective actions have been completed from an organization's point of view. Okay, so that's the scope, responsibility, and then these are the procedure details as to how often the internal audit needs to be conducted. Okay, like once a year here. And in terms of the auditors, what qualification and competence that he has to be trained, and so forth. Then the audit plan, pre-audit activities, on-site audit activities, doing the actual audit itself. Okay, and that will be the follow-up actions that will be needed, and also the internal audit response form. Okay, so these are the procedures, okay, for this. And then I'm going to show you a related document. Okay, so that is the procedure that organization is expected to have with regard to internal audit. Okay, and that they should have record to say that, okay, how often they plan to have these documents, okay, how often they should be keeping that, the retention period, and so on. Okay, there's also a flow chart for the internal audit that explains the flow. That they will first have to appoint the auditors. So in this case, just now we talked about the auditors, whether it will be the same people, different people, and so forth, right? You have to appoint auditors. Then after that, as the audit preparation begins, the team leader will have to liaise with the auditors on the preparation part of it. Okay, and then the coming out with the schedule and so on. So the auditors, when they come to do the field work, they will conduct the audit as per the audit schedule, right? And here you can see that, okay, is there any discrepancies, any gaps basically that from the findings from the audit? Then they will have to raise the audit for the acknowledgement, then reiterate until that is the whole audit is complete. Then you raise an audit report. Okay, and after that, the audit report will be reviewed during the closing meeting. Okay, and then the auditee will need to implement the corrective action. The team leader is expected to verify the corrective action and then submit the audit reports for management review for their approval. Okay, because the management is expected to have oversight on the internal audit results and the statuses of the corrective actions. So this is the process flow. Okay. Okay, I'm going to share some of the documents. Okay, here. Okay, there is some sample documents here that is related to the internal audit and some sample external audit reports. Okay, so I'm going to show you the audit schedule. Let's see. Okay, I think I need to log in. Okay, so this is the audit schedule and actual, all these are actual documents, okay, that I'm sharing with you. So it says, which are the business units that are being audited, the objective scope, and you can see the audit schedule here, right? You can see timing, what is the work that is going to be done, which is the audit area, right? Is it RAR, is it the scope, objectives, and who will be the auditee that will be required to be present during these time slots, okay, for the assessment. Okay, so this is an example of an audit schedule. Okay, so the other documents that I'd like to show you, let me stop share this. Okay, book paper, meaning that when we go into the client's site, then we follow the schedule to do the audit, right? So this will be documented, okay, as to who are the people who are being interviewed. And then this is where we have that findings that's similar to the one that you put up just now. Okay, so basically it is the description, okay, of the finding and the clause, the related clause in the ISO 22301. Just now, I think in your table, did you have the clause also?
Yeah, I put it for some, but yeah, I know for each and every finding we need to copy in the clause, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you use this as your, you can use this as your work document, and then you put down all the issues that you found. Okay. So this will be your work paper for the documentation of the audit report later. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So the audit report. So this is the internal audit report. Okay, an example of it.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the audit report. Okay, the auditor, that it is auditing against the ISO 301 standard. Okay, the units, business units, that are in scope. The audit proceedings with the people who have been represented for each of these business units. Okay, the documents that have been reviewed, and your audit findings with the indication whether there is an NC or is an observation. Okay, so this is an example of an audit report. Any questions so far?
No, it looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like an internal audit, so it's slightly different, yeah, from the ISO audit. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Okay, and that there is this, which is the audit response. I'll show you an example of an audit response. Okay. Okay, so this is an example of an audit response. So the issue basically is the finding, right? And that so in this case, the finding, whatever is the issue here, the CAT 2 assessment finding raised has not been closed. Okay, so there were no objective evidences for root cause analysis and the monitoring and closing of the issue. So the client actually put down because they are expected to do the root cause analysis, right? So why they do not have so they basically do not have a template for this, and the proposed action, okay, is that they will come up with a template to document the root cause analysis and effectiveness of corrective action. So the implementation date, by when, and what is the status or the of this issue. So it's currently being reviewed. Okay, so this is an example, can be an example of an audit response as well, based on the finding that have been raised.
So what's a CAT 2 assessment?
The CAT 2 assessment finding category 2. I'm not so sure about this one.
Okay, so it's probably a specific term used by the client.
Yeah. Okay. It could be that there's some definition somewhere about CAT 2. Yeah. But basically, here what we want to show you is that in a response from the client will be required for each of the findings that have been raised. Okay, that will have to be trackable, how would I say, trackable status of the actions that have been taken, so that in the follow-up audit, right, in audits, the follow-up audit for the organization, then they can actually come in here to see, oh, has this issue been closed? Has the action been done? Where is the evidence, and so forth. Okay, so that's the idea of it. Okay, yeah. So those are the sample internal audit reports. So next, I'm going to show you the external audit reports. Okay, this is an example of an external external report agenda. Okay, there have been like a communication on what it is. So during the preparation stage, right, you liaise with your clients, audit team leader. So what is the scope? Okay, and then the objectives, who will be the auditor who will be coming in, and schedule for the audit itself, like the date, the time, the clauses that will be audited, okay, the areas that will be audited, okay, and then when will the audit closing meeting be done, so that they can make sure that the management, the client management is available for that audit closing meeting. Okay, so this is an example of the agenda communication with the external auditor. Okay.
Okay.
Then there is an external audit report. Okay, which I will show you now. Okay, so this is the audit report or assessment report in this case. Okay. So assessment report. Okay, so this is the assessment report, the scope. So for external auditors, sometimes they have a template that they use. You know, they will have check boxes to indicate, okay, every stage of the audit they are at, okay, and so on. So every auditor, external auditor, will have their own templates that they use. Okay, they even have templates for, you know, which standard they are auditing against. Okay, then there's stage 1, stage 2 audit. Okay, so stage 1 and stage 2, right? Let's say, for example, if the organization is going for a certification, ISO 2301 certification audit. So for ISO audits, right, there's usually a stage 1 and a stage 2. Okay, so stage 1 audit is that they will verify that the whole objective is that they want to do a documentation review most of the time, okay, and also to see if they are actually ready to go for the stage 2 audit. Okay, so stage 1, what they will do is that they usually verify against the processes. They can look at your evidence of the documentation. And if they think that the client they have done what they are supposed to do, they will go to stage 2, where they will look at the management review process, whether the management is involved. They will also do verification of further evidence of the process and whether things have been implemented as what they have actually said. Okay, to talk to the clients and so on. So only after the stage 2, then they will decide whether they are ready to issue the certification. Okay, so the assessment report, okay, the findings, okay, how many AFI, how many okay, so just now you were talking about CAT 2, right? CAT 2 findings refer to minor lapses in the management system. CAT 1 is the major deficiencies. Okay.
Okay.
So they will have to be defined in the report itself. Okay. Okay. Is management system effectively for at least 3 months, you know, based on the review? Then the answer in this report is that the assessment is that is yes. Okay. And so on. So this is an example of an external audit report.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So conclusion, they'll say, okay, stage 1, is it okay? Stage 2, depending on what report this is it a stage 1 report or stage 2? Okay, so those are the example of the reports that I can show you. Okay, do you have any questions so far for today's
No, so far so good.
lesson? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just go through the preparation for the exam. Okay. In order to prepare for the exam, right? One of the things that is recommended for you to do is to take the trial exam. Have you done that?
No, so basically, I just want to do it before the real exam. So I'll keep that one for later.
Okay, all right. So it's important to do that practice, okay? Because that will also kind of verify that your user ID and password has no issues. So you can try that. You can try to go in there now, and then you can try again the next time. The actual, you can just go in to just check the access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, will do.
And then have you got your date for your exam?
I think the 4th of August. Yeah.
4th of August. Okay.
2 weeks.
So,
yeah.
Bani?
Sorry?
Yes, Rose.
Is it 4th of August that Frederick will be sitting for the exam?
No, it's on the 3rd of August.
Because there was an email, I think, saying that.
Yes, but I did inform you that it was on 3rd. It was supposed to be on the 2nd of August, and we postponed the 3rd
okay.
of August. Yes.
Okay. Okay, I like that. Okay, yeah, I remember it was like postponed by 1 day. Okay.
Okay, good. We'll confirm, huh? 3rd.
Yeah. Wednesday, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you've got your ID. So you're going to verify the access, and you're going to try that, and go through your terminologies. Okay, just to recap what you have got. You have learned during the few days. Because that will be some definition just to recap and refresh your mind. Okay, the rest of the concepts, I think more or less you've actually got it already. Okay, so that's all for the exam preparation. Nothing nothing complex. Yeah. Okay, so that will be the end for today's session. Okay. So if no more questions, then I'll just wish you the best and have and pass it so that you can get your certification, right?
Right. Yeah. So I understand that basically the test is really about, all the preparation which we did before the online sessions, right? So the theory, it's not really about the process, the audit process. It's about the BCM foundation, right? The BCMS, etc. So that's what I understand. Yeah.
Is the BCM foundation as well as the audit process. You need to be familiar that with the audit process, like for example, the 4-stage process that we talking about at the start. What does it mean? When you do field work, and then follow up. What is in that follow up stage and so on.
Okay. So that's also included in the multiple choice questions. Okay, understand.
Yes, because this is actually an audit course, so you will include that part of it.
Okay.
Okay. So all the best.
All right. Sure.
Yep, and have a good week, Frederick.
Thank you.